Orla per Gimel Mishnah Aleph. Begesh etzava beklipe orla. If a garment was dyed with coloring made from the peels of an orla fruit, yidolek it must be burnt because the improved appearance of the garment is considered hanoah, which was received from orla. The halacha is that if you have, even if you have shells or peels of fruits that are orla, gam haklipe masurim bahanoah, even the shells and peels are also bahanoah kedashinon. The Gemara Brachas, the Lamed Vavam and Beis Darshans, the pasuk by Orla as period, the fruit as a tafel of period S is coming to be marba, even the thing that's tafel to the pri, that's also asur bahana. In the ancient times, dyes were commonly made from plants, including the peels of certain fruits like pomegranates and the shells of walnuts. If the pomegranates or walnuts are made from an Orla tree, the peels and the shells are asur bahana. This is also learned out of a pasuk. So the halacha is that it must be burnt. The garment must be burnt like all arla. The Mishnah discussed the case where the dye cannot be washed out. If it can be removed, I guess if you soak it or you put it in some chemicals or some soap and it washes out the dye, so then the garment will be mutter to wear once you take out the dye. This Arv Ba'acherim, if the garment that was dyed with arla became mixed up with other garments and it cannot be told apart from them, it's Nisarev, Kulam Yudaleku, they must all be burnt so that no one will have hanoah from the garment that's asur. According to Rameir, the garment that's asur cannot become batul because the garment, the beged, is something chashuv and a significant item does not become batul. Rameir l'tamei is like the Rav, the Amar l'kamon, the Mishnah is going to say later on in Mishnah Zayin, Ashadarka limna is mekadosh. Something that's counted, davar shabaminyan, it's important, it's sold by unit, not by estimate. So then it's a kaddish and asers, beged shetzavar shedarka lemonoisu, and a beged that you dyed is something chashuv, so therefore it will not be able to become batal according to Rameir. Rameir asers all the garments in the mixture, even when there are enough other garments to be mevatel arla. This is because the beged is the davar shebeminyan. According to Rameir, any such item is in the category of a davar chashuv, which is not shaykh to become batal. The Chachamim say that the garment that's asur is batal if you have more than 200 in there. You have 200 dvarim hamutar keneged the one iser of arla. If there are 200 mutar garments in the mix, the arla dyed one becomes batal like any other arla, and all the garments may be used. According to the Chachamim, a garment, a beged, is not considered a davar chashuv in a sense that it will not become batal. The Amir l'kaman b'pirkin, the Chachamim say later on in the parak, in mekad shal shisha dvarim b'lvad, Allah Chachamim, the Chachamim say that only 6 things have this chashivas of davar shabaminyan and will become batal. V'halacha kachachamim, and the halacha is like the chacham in this case. Mishnah Beis. Hateveya malay hasit beklipe orla. If someone dyes a thread the length of a sit is a space between the index finger and the middle finger when they're spread as far apart as possible. It's a couple of inches. So if someone dyes a thread the length of a sit, samach yud tes, with coloring made from the peels of orla, and he wove it into a garment, and he doesn't know which thread it is. If it could be identified, then it's pashat that if you take it out, then the rest would be mutter. However, the Mishnah's case is talking about that the thread of Iser was lost, it was nisarev together with the other ones which are mutter. So Rameir says that the garment must be burnt because wearing it would mean having hanoah from Orla in that thread. It's a fascinating thing, it's a thread. It's not big at all. It's very, very small. Be'afal peik and Rameir holds it's still a davar chashuv. Rameir considers even a dyed thread the length of a sit a davar chashuv because it's a davar shebeminyan. Some said that the length is considered significant because of its measures used in the Torah to define the malacha of oireg on Shabbos, like the Mishnah says in Perkut Gimel in Masechta Shabbos. Fine, but I'll go upon it's a little bit of a chiddush over here that it's not automatically batal because of its size. The Chachamim say the thread is batal in a mixture of 201. So if there are at least 200 threads, mutter threads in the garment, so then the iser thread of arla becomes batal, and the garment, the beged, may be worn. The Chachamim followed l'shitasam, what they said in the previous Mishnah, that even a beged itself would become batal. So if a beged itself would become batal, so then definitely a thread would become batal. This case was taught only to show that Rameir is machmir even with a dyed thread. Mishnah Gimel. If someone weaves into a garment the thread, the shear, the length of a sit that was made from forbidden wool of a bechor. An animal bechor, a firstborn male calf, sheep or goat, is automatically kadosh when it's born. It's given to a kohen who brings it as a carbon and eats it. It's carbon shlom or carbon bachar. If it has a mum or it cannot be brought as a carbon, the kohen may shecht it and eat its meat, but it may not cut off its wool. Even the wool of a bachar that has a mum is also midrabanon to use. So if somebody uses this, if somebody wove into a garment the thread, the shear of a sit that was made from the forbidden wool of a bechor, yidalik habeged, the garment must be burnt because the thread doesn't become batal. Since it's usher to have hana from the wool of a bechor, the beged may not be used. Misar hanazir umipetach hamor basak yidalik hasak. Similarly, if someone weaves the length of a sit of the forbidden hair of a nazir is someone who makes a neder of nazirus, which asks him to drink wine, cut his hair, be metam l'mesim. When the nazir completes his nazirus, he must undergo a ritual that includes shaving his head, and that hair that he shaved off is also bahana, and it must be burnt. And yashlech tachas hadud, the Mishnah says, you throw it under the pot that you cook the shlamim in, and you burn the hair in the fire that you're using to cook the shlamim with. Or a peter chamor, or if you used a peter chamor is a firstborn male donkey, he must be paided with a sheep or a goat which is given to a kohen. If the owner doesn't want to be paided, he must chop off the head of the donkey. The nevel of the donkey is aser bahana, state in the Gemara, B'cheres of Testament base. So if someone weaves the length of a hair of a sit of the forbidden hair of a firstborn male donkey into a sack, yidalik hasak, the sack must be burnt because the hair doesn't become batal. The Mishnah goes. This Mishnah is Lashitas Remeir, who holds that a shred the length of a sit does not become batal. Animal hair and human hair are not usually woven into garments, but they're used in making sacks. This is why the Mishnah speaks of sacks in this case. It's interesting because the Maisa they make sacks out of goat hair. Uvam muktashim, and if the forbidden threads woven into a garment are from kachim, mekachin kol shehem, they ask the garment in any amount even less than the shear of a sit, because of the kedusha of the karbonis, the kedusha of kachim. The chachamim were extremely machmir with them, did not allow even the smallest part of a carbon to become batal. It's forbidden to have any hana from an animal that was niskadish as a carbon. At the beginning of the Mishnah, we learned that the wool of a bechar, which is kadosh, asks an entire garment with a shear of kumloi hasit. The Mishnah there is discussing a bechar that had a mum, which is no longer fit to be brought as a carbon. For this reason, the wool doesn't ask the garment unless it is the shear of a sit. So that's why it's not going to be a kasha from the previous Mishnah. Mishnah Dalet. Tafshel shabishla beklipe arla yidalik. Food that was cooked on a fire made from the shells of arla must be burnt. The shells were used as fuel for the fire, which is very common. That there is shvach eitzim betavshel, because since the food has been improved through the arla shells, making use of the food is considered having hana from the arla. Although the food doesn't contain any actual arla, the food was improved through the arla that was used to cook it. The Mishnah is teaching us that we view this improvement as hana from the arla. Yeshvach etzim betavshel, the improvement of the wood is contained in the food. Therefore, eating the food is considered having hana from arla, even though the arla itself no longer exists. We go so weit as to say that if that food became mixed with others, it's batal only be'echad u'masayim, that if you have 200 pieces of other cooked food to one piece of this arla cooked food cooked over an arla fire is not worse than actual arla, which becomes batal in a mixture of 200 to 1. Even Remeir, who holds that a garment or a thread dyed with arla dye cannot become batal, does agree in this case that food cooked with klipe arla can become batal. This is because the food is not usher on its own account, meaning mitzad the food itself there's no isser in here b'chlal. There's just a shvach eitzim betavshel. So then, since the shells that he used were not a davar shabaminion, it was just used as a firewood, so then that could be batal, and the food cooked with them is not, you're not going to be machmer than you are with the actual firewood that you're using. Now we get into something a little more sticky. Mishnah Hey, Tanu shehisiku beklipe orla of avabayas hapas. If an oven was heated with a fire made from shells of arla and then you bake bread in it. The pashtus is that we're talking about an oven if you use an oven for the first time you use an oven, especially the ones that were made out of cheres and the times that in Mishnah and the Gemara, so they were solidified the first time you made it. So the fire of Isser that you're using the klipe arla with is going to be baked into the walls of the tanner. So tanner sheisiku beklipe arla v'afabayas hapas. If an oven was heated with a fire made from the shells of arla and then you baked bread into it, the pas must be burnt. Since the bread came to being through the arla, using the bread is considered having hana from arla. Here too, the hana that you're getting over here is Yeshvach is going to be the svara, Yeshvach etzim b'pas. The sarva ba'achera is talabech masayim. If this bread became mixed with others, it's bottle in a mixture of 201, 200 ordinary breads to one arla baked bread, as we previously explained. Mishnah Vav. Misha hoyle chavile siltan shel kili akarmi daleku. If someone has bundles of siltan, which is fenugreek, which we came across throughout Seder Zerah, that were aser as klayim, they must be burnt. Both arla and kili akarim must be burnt, and both are aser b'hana, and both become bottled in 201. Siltan is an herb with edible leaves, and it's used as a spice. So this fenugreek, this siltan, was planted together or next to grapevines, which caused it to become kili akarim. It was then collected and tied into bundles. A bundle consists of at least 25 stalks of siltan. So misha hoyle chavile siltan shel kili akarim mitaleku. If any of these bundles got mixed with other bundles of siltan kulim midaleku, they must all be burnt, even if there were 200 or more bundles of siltan that's moted to Remeir, as they said to Remeir. Remeir holds that these bundles is a davar shebeminion, so it's a davar chashuv, so it's not going to become bottle. And the Chachamim l'shitasam, again in this parak, are going to say that it is going to be bottle be'echad b'masayim. A bundle is a davar shebeminion according to Remeir, because it's sold by unit rather than by estimate. So people don't sell a basket full of bundles, rather they charge separately for each bundle. So according to Remeir, any item which on account of its significance is sold by unit cannot become bottle. Masha enke the Chachamim hold that it's bottle by chad masayim, because it's not a davar shebeminion. It's the Chachamim do not consider it a davar shebeminion so significant that it cannot become bottle. Therefore, even bundles of siltan can become bottle if it has 200 to 1. And it's a lot dafka that this is going to apply to other Yisurim also, but it's going to be dafka in this case, because in this case, the Chachamim don't look at it as davar shebeminion, as a davar chashuv. Shahir Remeir Omer. Here comes the yisod of the machlekes Remeir and the Chachamim. Mishnah Zayin. Shahir Remeir Omer, because Remeir used to say, something that's customarily counted when it's sold and not merely estimated, answers if it falls into a mixture. The Chachamim say, only 6 items become bottles. So let's take this slowly a little bit. This is going to go back to explain all this machlekes between Remeir and the Chachamim throughout the parak. So, if you have a davar shebeminion, according to Remeir, because it's chashuv, people sell it by an exact count of the pieces and don't merely estimate by how many there are. And why are we using the term mekadesh over here? The Mishnah uses the word mekadesh to mean aser, based on the pasuk of Pentukta Shamalea, which is the pasuk of the Isra of Kilei Akarim. So according to the Rambam, the Torah used the word kadesh to indicate that the taruvas must be burnt. Pentu kadesh, that's the lashon of the Gemara, and that's why we use this term to explain that to pass on halacha that it should get burnt. The Chachamim say that only 6 items become aser when they fall in, and will not become, and it's not shaykh to become bottle. Rabbi Kiva Omer Shiva. Rabbi Kiva says there are 7 things that would become bottle. The Chachamim and Rabbi Kiva agree with Remeir. The Chachamim and Rabbi Kiva argue with Remeir. They hold that even something sold by a precise count is not important enough to prevent it from becoming bottle. An item must be particularly special to qualify as a davar chashuv. The items in the Mishnah are large and expensive and the most outstanding of their species, so it's going to stick out much more than typical of that peri. And these are the 6 items. Agoze perach, the walnuts of perach. What are they exactly? So the Rab says, Shemet Shmois Mekayim, saying the name of places. Vanishamati, agoze perach are agozem sheklipas and rachav and frachim. He heard that the pshat why they're called agoze perach, Peiresh Chav, is because these walnuts have a soft shell and they crumble and they fall apart easily. Rimone Bodam, the pomegranates of Bodam. What is that? It's also the name of a place. Chaviyos Stumais. The third one is sealed barrels of wine. What's the cheshivas? Because you don't estimate it, you sell each one separately. Bechulfas Tradin, the leaves of beets. The leaves and the long stalks that grow out of the beetroot. So certain types of beets have large leaves that grow from long, colorful stalks that emerge from the beetroot itself. The part that we eat, we're referring to here as the root. These leaves and stalks are used as food. People would eat them. And then you have kolsei krov, the stalks of cabbage, the stems with their leaves. In other words, the heads of cabbage. The cabbage of Eretz Yisrael are very large and very tasty, as we know from the Gemara at the end of Ksubis, that there was a fox that was so big that there was a fox that was living in one of them. But here, this is the special type that's very, very large, Udlas Yavanis, a Greek gourd. And that's what it is. And Rabbi Kiva says, Afkikr Shabalabayas. Also, the loaves of a balabayas. The loaves of a balabayas are larger than the loaves of a baker. Additionally, he uses more chashav of flour, which ends up making more chashav of bread. So, Rabbi Kiva wants to say that that's not going to become batal. So, if any of these 7 items were aser, whether through klayim, whether through orla, or any of these isurim that are aser b'hano, and they were mixed together with similar items, they can't become batal. So the Mishnah will explain how these 7 items will become aser. Haroila, orla, kilei hakerem. The ones in this list that were fit to be orla were forbidden as orla, and the ones that were fit to be kilei hakerem were forbidden as kilei hakerem. Of the 7 foods listed above, the agayze perech, the remaining bodan, and the chaviyei stumais are fit to be orla since they grow on trees. Remember, orla is specific to trees and not to any other plants. The next 3, the cholfei trodin, the Dlas Yavanis, and the Kulsei Krov, the last 3, they can't become orla because they're vegetables. So they could only become aser as kilei hakerem by being planted in a vineyard. Kilei hakerem applies only to grains and vegetables planted in a vineyard and not fruit trees that are planted there, as we discussed in Masechta Klayim. Wine which comes from grapes can become both kilei hakerem and orla. The 7 zachin that are mentioned in the Mishnah were of special significance in Eretz Yisrael in the times of Mishnayos. Items of equal importance of other places or times are similarly not going to become batal. The Mishnah listed these 7 items because that was considered chashuv at the times of the Mishnayos, but avada, it'll change with the times. And it doesn't mean today lav dafka does anybody have any cheshivas with the agayze perich if we even know what they are. Al kaponim. If today, let's say somebody has a sourdough bread, so that's a davar chashuv. So that would maybe fall under Rabbi Kiva's category of kikr shabalbayis in a certain sense. Maybe even if you buy from a store because it's so expensive or whatever. But al kaponim, that will change with the times. It's not something that sticks, with the rigidly with the din of the Mishnah. Mishnah Ches Ketzad. According to the previous Mishnah, we listed 6 things that don't become batal according to the Chachamim, and 7 things according to Rabbi Kiva. The Mishnah spoke of whole items, but what's the halacha if these things are not whole? Ketzad, under what conditions do these items not become batal? When they are whole. But in Nispatzu ha'agayzim, if the walnuts were cracked open, Nispardu ha'rimayim, the pomegranates were split, Nispatzu ha'chaviyos, the barrels were open, Nischatzu ha'dchaluim, the gourds were cut, Nisparzu ha'kikris, or the loaves were cut up, Yalu ba'echad ha'masayim, they can become batal in a mixture of 201. The items listed in the previous Mishnah are considered to be too important to become batal only when they are shalim. Once they're not shalim anymore, they lose their cheshivos, and they could become batal the same way any other orla or kilei hakerem would become batal. The Mishnah is discussing a case where these special items fell into the taruvas after they were already broken. The halacha in a case where they fell in whole and then they broke apart is a machlekes tanoim in a braysa in Gittin Nafnun Dalad on the base. Mishnah Tes Safik orla be'eretz Yisrael aser b'surya motor u'b'chutz aretz yerid v'lekeach u'b'vad shalei yirenu loiket. The final Mishnah of the Masechta of the Parak discusses the halachas of possible orla or kilei hakerem, the fruit that may be orla or kilei hakerem, but we don't know for sure. This is a safek. Generally, when there's a question whether something's aser, we have to be, it's safek deraisa l'chumra and safek derabbanan l'kula. In regard to orla and kilei hakerem, the Mishnah will teach us that there's an afkamina between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. So safek orla, possible orla, fruit that may have come from an orla tree, but we don't know for sure. Well, how did this safek come about? A guy brought fruit from his orchard. His orchard contained both orla and non-orla trees, and we don't know whether the fruit he brought was from the orla or the non-orla trees. Ve'en yudua imishal orla imishal zkena. So the Eretz Yisrael aser. If the fruit grew in Eretz Yisrael, it's aser. Since the isra of orla is deraisa, so there's a suffix about it, we have to be machmer, because the general rule of any suffix deraisa is going to be l'chumra. Ubesurya motor, but if the fruit grew in Surya, which is only Isser midrabanan, because it's only considered part of Eretz Yisrael midrabanan, it's mutter to buy fruit that may possibly be Arla, as long as we don't buy it from a field that is known to contain some Arla trees. The Isser of Arla, Minat Torah, actually applies even outside Eretz Yisrael, as the Mishnah will say later on, but only in cases where it's Arla Vadai. Safek Arla Minat Torah is going to be Asr in Chutz La'aretz. Surya is around Saiva, the area roughly corresponding to present-day northern Syria, it was conquered by David HaMelech. It was not part of Eretz Yisrael under Midinei HaTorah, but Midrabanan, they were geyser that it should have many halachas as in Eretz Yisrael, as we discussed many times throughout Seidas Run. Outside Eretz Yisrael, the halacha is even more lenient. A yid may go down to a field that is both arla and non-arla trees and buy fruit that was already picked by a guy. As long as he doesn't actually see the guy gathering the fruit from the trees, since it's not clear that the fruit came from the arla trees, he may buy it and eat it. However, in Syria, the Chachamim were not mated this. They were only mated this from a guy if he found him with his fruit outside the field, but it's possible that his fruit was from somewhere else. Since Syria had a din, since Syria Midrabanan has a din like Eretz Yisrael, so the Chachamim were more machmer about a suffix of arla because they wanted to have the din Eretz Yisrael, not the din Chutz La'aretz. So as long as he doesn't actually see the guy gathering the fruit from the trees, since it's not clear that the fruit came from the arla trees, he may buy it and eat it. However, if he sees him pick the fruit, he may not buy it, but this is only going to be a chumrah midrabanan. Where we see him picking the fruit from this field, the only question that remains is whether the tree he picked from was arla or not arla. The Chachamim were not matter buying such fruit since it might lead people to buy fruit from a guy, even when it was clearly from arla. They were only matter buying fruit in a field when it had already been picked before the yid came, so that there's still a slight chance that the fruit is not from this field at all. Kerem netua yarak, if there's a vineyard that was planted with vegetables, causing the vegetables to become kilei hakerem, and it may not be eaten, and you're not allowed to have hana from it. So the yarak numchu chutzaloi, and the vegetables are being sold outside the vineyard, and we don't know if they came from this vineyard or somewhere else. Said Allah Chazazeh, Eretz Yisrael Asr. In Eretz Yisrael, the vegetables are Asr, since the Isra of kilei hakerem in Eretz Yisrael is Midiraisa. So when you have a suffix, you have to go suffix to Raisa L'chumra. With Surya mutter, but if the possible kilei hakerem vegetables grew in Surya, they're mutter because the Isra of kilei hakerem in Surya is only with Rabbanon and suffix Rabbanon L'kula. You don't have to be machmer. Kilei hakerem is also with the Raisa only in Eretz Yisrael. Outside Eretz Yisrael, it's mutter with Rabbanon, as the Mishnah will say, and the halacha is suffix Rabbanon L'kula. Umechutz la'aretz yer like it. Outside Eretz Yisrael, the halacha is even more mekel. A yid may ask a guy to go down and gather vegetables on his behalf, even though they may be kilei hakerem. Provided that the yid doesn't pick with his own hand. The Mishnah is discussing a case where the vegetables are in or near his vineyard and are not usher as kilei hakerem. Since it's possible that the guy will give him something that's mutter, he's allowed to ask him to go gather vegetables for him. However, the yid may not pick the vegetables himself, since he can see which vegetables are picked. Similarly, if he sees a guy pick vegetables that are definitely kilei hakerem, he may not take them. In the case of arla outside Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to ask a guy to gather it for you from a field that contains arla, but you can buy from something that was already picked. And the last halacha is hachadash asur min haTorah b'chol makom. Chadash is asur min haTorah everywhere, even outside Eretz Yisrael. V'arla halacha v'aklayim midivri seifrim. The word chadash means new. The Torah says that the new crop of grain, which is wheat, barley, spelt, rye, and oats, may not be eaten until the korban omer has been brought on the 16th day of Nisan, which is the second day of Pesach. Nowadays, we don't have a Beis Hamikdash to bring the korban omer, so the new crop becomes mutter at the end of the day on the 16th of Nisan. And the reason why we do Sferas Omer, one of the reasons Rishonim speak out, the reason why we do Sferas Omer is a zeicha for this korban omer that they brought in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. The Tana of our Mishnah holds that the Isra of Chadash applies min haTorah even outside Eretz Yisrael, and he learned this from the end of the pasuk by Chadash, which says b'chol ma'ash v'seichem, wherever you live. And there's machlekes Tanaim about this. Not everyone's masking to this, but al kol panim, this Mishnah holds that Chadash is asur min haTorah b'chol makom. But arla halacha, the arla is asur outside Eretz Yisrael. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai, which has a din d'oraisa. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai is halacha given to Moshe on Har Sinai, which was not written in the Torah itself. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai about arla included in it that in cases where there's a suffix of arla, we should be makel about it, even though it has the status of a deraisa. This is the reason why the Mishnah said above that the possible arla, suffix arla, were makel outside Eretz Yisrael. That's the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. By klayim the Beisayfer, but klayim kilei hakerem is asur outside Eretz Yisrael only midrabanan. What's the reason for this? The Isra applies only to klayim kilei hakerem, since such klayim is asur in Eretz Yisrael, even bahano. So the Chachamim were asur that outside Eretz Yisrael as well. However, they didn't asur klayim of kilei Yisrael, only kilei hakerem outside Eretz Yisrael. Since this kind of klayim is not asur bahano in Eretz Yisrael, grafting different species of trees together is asur min haTorah even outside of Eretz Yisrael. Ad kan Masechta Orla, Hadron Lachem Masechta Orla.